to introduce to you the moderator of today's event, Dr. Madhura Yadav, Director, School of Architecture and Design, Manipal University, Jaipur. She is an architect planner with over 25 years of experience and the founding director of School of Architecture and Design at Manipal University, Jaipur. She is one of the founder member in establishing Faculty of Design at Manipal University. She has been part of several committee expert groups set up by Government of India on jury of various architectural competitions. She is also on editorial board of Architecture, Urban Design and Urban Planning India journals. Moreover, she has published a number of papers in national and international researches and conferences. She is an UNESCO certified mentor for community-based participatory research and an Indian Green Building accredited professional. She has also conducted workshops, conferences on waste management, bamboo architecture, earthquake resistant structures, sustainable cities, buildings, etc. Her current research interests are architecture, ecology, interface, and eco-cities, promotion of eco-materials, and community-based participatory research. She is a recipient of Educational Leadership Award 2019 by Devang Mehta, National Education Awards and Distinguished Faculty Members in Architecture Awards. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Manish. Good morning to one and all. I welcome all eminent panelists and viewers for panel discussion on sustainable dialogue organized by Design Cohort in collaboration with DST Rajasthan. Design is everywhere, an integral part of our lives. Design needs to be used as a medium to open dialogue, create livelihoods, and bring communities together through a conscious awakening that it forms the basis of a creative ecology. End product of design is not what we see, but what happened in the making of it. The discussion will touch upon sustainability and versatility in design and about equality to environments. Collaborative efforts can be the forerunners of change. So this panel includes experts from architecture, urban design, planning, fashion, craft, heritage, policymakers, and administrators. It's my pleasure to introduce all panelists. Srimati Mugdha Sinhaji, a career civil servant with 20 years of experience in governance, policy making, and international trade negotiations. She has worked with the ministries of textile, industry, and commerce, both at the center and in her Kedah state of Rajasthan, as also in food, public distribution, and consumer affairs. She has served as a district collector in Bundi, Hanumangarh, Junjunu, and Ganganagar. She is currently Secretary of Department of Science and Technology, Government of Rajasthan, and holding an additional charge as a Secretary, Art, Literature, Culture, and Archaeology, and DG Jawahar Kala Kendra, Rajasthan. She is alumnus of LSR, JNU, and University of Berkeley, California, USA, and a recipient of the Ford Foundation Scholarship. She has been published in Sahitya Academic Journal of English Literature and in Femina for her poetry skills, and has also published a book on Bundi stepwells and art. And she is the one who has created Design Cohort in DST Rajasthan. And thank you, madam, for bringing all design institutions and architectural institutions of Jaipur at one platform. Professor Chetan Vaidya. Professor Chetan Vaidya is an architect planner with over 30-year long academic research and consultancy experience of urban development. He has served as director of the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, director of National Institute of Urban Affairs, chairman of Planning Education Board of All India Council of Technical Education, and as an independent director of Housing and Urban Development Corporation. He was given Distinguished Alumni Award by Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur in 2015. Presently, he is Senior National Urban Advisor, Kochi Smart City, supported by German International Cooperation. Architect Akshay Kaul. Akshay Kaul specifies in the field of ecological planning, landscape, and sustainable architecture, and possesses more than 25 years of experience in India and USA. Architect Kaul has received International Award for Living Design City Competition for Sustainable Cities 2011 and won the International Competition Design for South Asian University, New Delhi. Master Planning Competition for Institute of Public Health and Management at Gujarat and University of Science and Technology, Kashmir. He has been an advisor to State Urban Agenda for Rajasthan for master planning for City of Jaipur and urban environmental development issues. He is on the expert committee on ecological corridors in Delhi. Architect Ashok Lal. Ashok Lal is an architect practicing in Delhi since 1981. His practice specifies in environmentally and socially sustainable design. He has researched and written about sustainability extensively. He has also been involved with architectural education since 1984. He was Dean of Studies at TVB School of Habitat Studies, New Delhi, and at present he is Design and Technology Chair at Krivia, Mumbai. Dr. Shikha Jain. She specifies in the domain of architectural conservation, and her experience ranges from representations at International World Heritage UNESCO meetings to conservation planning and implementation of more than 50 conservations, World Heritage and museum projects across India and overseas, largely realized through her organization, DRONA. As an international expert, she has advised the National Heritage Board, Singapore, FRIM Malaysia, SGTS UAE UNESCO Jakarta Office, Indonesia, UNESCO New Delhi Office, and the Department of Archaeology, Myanmar. She represented India as a cultural heritage expert in UNESCO World Heritage Committee from 2011 to 2015. She received HUDCO Heritage Awards for 2 Jaipur urban conservation projects, that is Jaipur Bazaars and Ghat Ki Goni in 2013, that are also documented as best practice projects by the Ministry of Urban Development. Dr. Mojgan Jahanara. As a researcher at heart, Dr. Jahanara has extensively researched on Iranian motifs and textiles, comparative forms in Asia, Asian fabrics and costumes, colors in Persian art, etc., and is an expert in sustainable textiles and has served as a visiting professor at IICD Jaipur, India. She has published several articles in books, research papers, organized and mentored various exhibitions, workshops, and given seminars and talks in Iran, Japan, Malaysia, and India on variety of topics associated with tree of life motif, Iranian art, and textiles. Dr. Vaibhavi Ranaude, an educator, researcher, and designer with 20 years of experience. Dr. Ranaude has been founding HOD of premier design schools in India, including Symbiosis Institute of Design, MIT Institute of Design, Pune, and Pearl Academy, Mumbai. She has diverse research experience in the area of semiotics in fashion, Indian fashion system, slow fashion side of sustainable fashion. She is also the co-founder and principal designer of slow fashion label Vaibhavi P, which provides sustainable livelihoods to Indian craftsperson and promoting Indian textiles worldwide. So to start with the dialogue on sustainability, I would like to say that in last 3 decades, sustainability as a term has been picking up popularly across the world. On the other hand, it has become the most misused word of this decade. Everybody wants to define sustainability as per their own convenience and interest. As a result, the true spirit of sustainability is diluted somewhere. For a large population, this simply means putting new solar panels and planting trees and saving environment. Hence, the dialogue is essential to understand the real spirit of sustainability in design. To expand the discussion, I would like to divide it into two basic questions. And the first question will be for all panelists. We'll start with architect Ashok Lal. The question is, what is the true spirit of sustainability? Is it an obsession of designers or the need of this time? Over to architect Ashok Lal.
So you asked the question point blank. And really, this question, as significant as this one, requires a great deal of preparation. But nevertheless, I would like to make an attempt. I think you're right. The true spirit in architectural design or sustainability is one which arises out of a deep understanding between society, the way we build buildings and use buildings, and the natural systems within which we survive as living beings. So when you have a deep understanding of these three corners in a total system, spirit of sustainability arises from that. It means that each time I, as a designer, or anybody else as a designer, especially of buildings, launch on a design project, we are acutely aware of the ways in which this is using the resources provided by nature, and in ways in which it impacts the balances of nature on which life is dependent. So that's the spirit, a deep awareness of this relationship. The other side of the deep awareness is something which is an issue of social and economic development. And I think that's a crucial thing also to remember, that each time, again, we design and propose solutions for our buildings, we need to be aware of how this way of building contributes to development of scientific knowledge and a distribution of wealth through the process of building, so that we can produce a society which has a habitable environment, which is healthy and safe. And in the production of that environment, we actually distribute wealth to produce a more equitable, self-sufficient, a decent way of living. So I think if I were to be brief about it, this is where, in these sort of concepts, the spirit of sustainable design in architecture rests.
Okay, over to architect Akshay Kaul.
Thank you, Ashok, and good to see you all. Yeah, I completely resonate with what Ashok was saying, and in order to realize that, I think there's a shift in their internal consciousness that's required, because we have to understand that we have a very limited time on this planet, as well as the planet itself has a limited time. And if we realize that for a moment that we are guests on this planet of the Creator, and that the Creator has made this place into a beautiful, harmonious, balanced place, and that each element on this planet that the Creator has made has a particular lifespan. Just like the human being, we arise and then we merge back into the soil. If only we realize that whatever we create, whether it's a building, whether it's a neighborhood, if we realize this principle that whatever we create with minimal amount of energy, if we can create and if it can dissolve back into the soil, So I think if you realize that that's the spirit to me of 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 creating and understanding sustainability. And what there are just 3 or 4 things that if you understand. Firstly, with minimal amount of disturbance to the existing natural and ecological processes, if we can do that, it's about fixing simple things like water, which is the essence for life, the soil, which gets completely degraded in the process of construction. It's completely mutilated, if we can preserve the soil and that 39 inches of the soil, which is the essence for food production, if we can do that, and that, if we can create a habitat and live so that it's not just about us, if we can respect and create the habitat for the bees and the birds and the insects, so that our food production itself is not affected. And if we can just create enough vegetation habitat for the air to breathe, and that in any of these steps that we do, there is social equity. Like Ashok said, that the wealth must go down to even the lowest, and the benefit should benefit into the entire social fabric, not just one segment. So I think to me that is the spirit of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshay. I have been asked to start by Madhura. I think she's lost connectivity in between. So I guess, sustainability, of course, it's a big term, and Madhura's question is quite relevant, whether how we are using this term today. And of course, I mean, we understand this term primarily as an environmental sustainability, which Mr. Lal and Akshay have also mentioned or focused on, and that is primary. But of course, I mean, with my area of work in cultural heritage, I primarily look at cultural sustainability and its link with social, environmental, and economic. And of course, we can look at our historic settlements, architecture, how there was interaction with the environment, and one realizes probably way back, there was more of sustainability without the talk of sustainability. And today we see there is more of this term being used, though it's not actually sustainable. And I feel in the current scenario, it is very difficult to practice sustainability in totality. And we go back and look at some of the landscapes that are still existing. And this is so because, post-industrial, the use of resources was so much that we have actually generated unsustainable environments across the world. And now what we are trying to do is designers or creators are trying to justify their designs or go back to sustainability in a very limited micro level. Sorry, hello?
No, go ahead, Shikha.
We can hear you, Dr. Shikha, you can go ahead.
Because Professor Vaidya said he can't hear, so.
No, we can hear you clearly.
Going back to what I was trying to say, I said that it's very difficult to practice sustainability in its own sense in the current scenario where we have already created unsustainable cities across the world and we are living in those. So of course, macro level sustainability will probably take a long time, but in short term, micro level, as designers, we try to design or create sustainable designs, and at times I feel it is only just for justifying the design or for marketing purpose. And that's why we need to look at it more from a macro level, some of it which Akshay has already shown, looking at environment as a totality. but how much of it can we go back to? How much of our natural resources we can reuse? That. So it's definitely something that we need to practice. It's not just the need of this time, it's a need, has been a need of all time, stay as is. And we've looked at, historically situations where the sustainability balance was lost and complete, civilizations were destroyed. So this is a sort of warning for us, and that's why we need to really focus on sustainability in its true sense today. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Professor Chetan Vaidya. I think he lost connection.
Yeah, I think it's less connection.
Yeah. Professor Vaibhavi?
Yeah, hello. I think a very good morning to all of you. And at the risk of repeating myself with regards to what the spirit of sustainability uh, is, I would talk about three major aspects of sustainability. That is about, of course, eco-sustainability. We're talking about sustainable livelihoods and also cultural sustainability. So I think sustainability is a way of life, and it is something that we have to practice every day to live a life one with nature. And it's a collective responsibility of the design community as well as the consumer who's using the services and the products that are being created and put out. So I think there needs to be a better awareness towards what sustainability is and how each one can have an impact towards embracing a sustainable way of life. Often sustainability is assumed to be expensive, which in the larger scenario is not, because someone somewhere is paying the price for it. And one needs to be aware of how we can mitigate that, whether someone is losing a livelihood, or we are losing out or increasing the carbon footprint, or someone is some is lost. So whether it is roti kapda or makan, and I'm not here to talk about the other, there are many experts on the panel to talk about architecture and buildings and all of that. My area of work is in regards to clothing and fashion. And I think everyone needs to be has a larger control towards embracing sustainability in their wardrobe, in their everyday life, and therefore being aware of how the process of making clothes is taking place, and taking that decision at each level while making the clothes, while buying clothes and wearing them more often, so that they don't land up in a landfill. And you maximize on that and make sure the people involved in this process have been treated well, have earned a good living wage, and have good, safe, and healthy work environment. I think for the opening remarks, I will restrict myself here, and then we'll go ahead with it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Over to Professor Chetan Vaidya.
Sorry, I lost the connection, and more
Yes,
than
sir.
that, I missed Shikha's. Yeah. I think the good background has been given on sustainability. So I think sustainable development it seems from definition of sustainability. And United Nations has given us this sustainable development goals to end poverty, craft, equal, just, and secure world. I think that should be objective of sustainability. And these are 17 goals with 169 targets to be achieved by 2030. As far as urban planning or urban development is concerned, we can focus, as urban planners, we can focus on SDG 11 to make sustainable cities and communities, make them inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. I think that should be objective of sustainability. And in this context, it's very important to look at impact of COVID-19 on city planning process or city development process, particularly the impact of physical distancing. At the same time, we as urban India is very diverse and very large. One solution fits all will not work for India, and that is something we need to keep in mind. So this is my approach to sustainability in case of urban development is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Over to Mojgan. Can you hear us? Unmute yourself. I think her audio is not working, it seems. Yeah. Mugdha madam is there? Mugdha madam?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, hello. And do you have my picture also?
We can hear you, we can see you.
Okay. Sorry, I found you very late because I lost the connection. So it took time. So I missed some of the talks of the friends. But I hope, can you hear me now?
Yes. We can hear you.
Yeah. So I'm just missed the I mean the talks of the friends. I hope I'm not going in the other direction now. But my experiences and all my works are based on the traditional study. I think in this very important substantial fashion also, or even the craft, some Asian countries like us, like Iran, like India, we need to focus on the really rich heritage which we have in the traditional knowledge. One example I can bring is for example, the mass production which we started in our country. I mean, in Iran is a little bit different with other countries. But for example, I think we didn't do well to follow the mass production with the very low quality and I mean the low quality and without any value of the making clothes and fabric and everything in our society. So one of the very important things which we have in our tradition richly is value and quality. I think we need really to pay the very unique attention to these things which we have in our environment and in our tradition. And I mean, for doing much better in production, whatever it is in the power looms or in the hand looms or in the handmade things. We need little bit to return back to our tradition and the old knowledge which we have to find out about better way to going on, because we didn't do well actually in last even 50, 100 years back. So now we can see some effects in the environment and even in ourselves. Is the production is not good, is not good enough for us to use, and even
I think she lost connection.
I lost the connection. Yeah.
Over to Mugdha ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much, Madhura ji, and a very, very warm welcome to all our esteemed fellow panelists. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to share very briefly that our design conclave, which was conceived by all esteemed members, we have about 12 institutions which are practicing design, architecture, planning, and heritage conservation in Rajasthan, Jaipur specifically, I would say. We've been working with them, and it is a very good example of the private institutions trusting the government and the government delivering on their promises, which is I think something rare at times in these days. So I'm extremely grateful to all members, including the Manipal University, which is hosting day 2, event 1, and I seem to have met a few of them. I think I've met Akshay Kaul and Mojani madam, I think in IICB, and Chetan Vedya, I'm being told, is a cousin of a friend of mine. So Yeah, and the rest I've heard. So thank you very much, and many, many compliments for doing this panel. See, I am a policy maker and not an expert on design. But I can tell you that in the government, what we design is the framework or the architecture of policies, and there is a design embedded in the way the policies are conceived. And also, it becomes very important that new ideas, if you want mass acceptability, they should become institutionalized. In the government, what we understand as sustainable is institutionalization of things so that they do not remain personality based. And and because anonymity is an important jewel of the civil services, that your work should speak for you. So institutionalization becomes very, very important, and that is how I have seen sustainability. Now, of course, sustainability can be defined in many ways, but just like in the government, we have something called citizen-centric approach, or what Mahatma Gandhi, the picture at the back, you can say, the talisman that he gave us, which says that whenever you're making or taking any decisions, kindly look at the last man standing in the queue. Similarly, in the field of design, you have something called the human-centric design concept. And people like Don Norman have written a lot, not just about the design of everyday things, but also the emotional quotient in design. If you look at nature, you have this concept of biomimicry, because I'm also Secretary Science and Technology and Art and so I find that it's very important that when God designed nature, there was a plan, because he is the biggest or maybe the first designer. So when God designed nature and man has only replicated, so if you look at the design of the aircraft, you will see it is tempered or modeled on the design of how the bird flies, right? So I think that is called biomimicry. And because over the years, man, for whatever reasons, has become the center of the universe and not just part of it. So I think we have moved away from, the design that is already available in nature, which is sustainable, because it is only with human intervention that sometimes spoils the design of the nature. You have seen during COVID that when we were in lockdown, the air quality improved, the quality of the water in the rivers improved. So I think nature has this basic, even if you look at the human body, scientists have written books on lifespan. There's a very nice book called Lifespan, which talks about the gene circuit and how when the genes repair the DNA, they do not perform the reproductive function. So there is a design to human beings. So keeping it short, I will say that, it is very, very difficult to identify good design, because good design becomes so embedded. So all we can do, as Don Norman says, that we can only identify bad design. The value of good design lies in the fact that it should have some kind of usability, it should have some kind of understandability, it should have some kind of feasibility. And just like in government policy, because times and technologies are changing very fast, we have to understand that what was useful yesterday may not remain useful. So the ability of the white elephant to be able to swerve and move with the times, which is called review in policy mechanism, should also be there in design. So design is perpetually changing, and good observation of what is bad design, what is good design, and whether there is acceptability. See, there are times when very good products have failed because they were not either serving a problem. In science, we say that all research should be translational so that they solve a problem of society. For a good design, it removes the drudgery in any way. Also, somebody spoke about buildings, right? I think Mr. Kaul spoke about sustainability of buildings and how loosely we talk about such kind of things. Energy efficiency is a new facade. I think Madhura ji also spoke about that, the fact that we only think of putting solar panels. So my request is that when we talk of design, fortunately, unfortunately, sometimes in the government, not of course in Rajasthan, because we inaugurated a design conclave. So Rajasthan government very much understands and appreciates the value of design, not just in academia, but also in functionality, in terms of design functionality. So I think when we talk of design, and I will end with this, that all, just like everything is conceived in the brain. The conceptualization happens in the brain. All aspirations arise as dreams in the brain. So when especially because all of you are designers and architects, you think of something, you visualize something, and then you put it down on paper, and then policy practitioners put them, in terms of buildings, and then based on the usage, based on the experience, because there is a whole concept of experiential living now. So based on that experience, then you take lessons from it and transform it. So I think it's a very design is a very dynamic process of observation, of thinking out of the box, keeping the human-centric usability, functionality in mind. I think that is my understanding of design. I am not an academician of design, so I'll be happy to learn from everybody who is an expert. But this is arising from my own common sense understanding of having worked in the government and implementation. What you probably say, what you put down in paper, if your contractor is not able to design it in the manner it was conceived, then I think there will be a disconnect. So I think this is my understanding of design, and sustainability might become corrupted, but the fact is that we have to restore, just like we keep trying to do the things and redeem the government for the private sector and for our stakeholders. I think there is a huge responsibility which lies on each one of our shoulders, that we must redeem the word sustainability, maybe replace it with circular economy or whatever. See, there is nothing in a name. The idea is on ground. We should be able to do the kind of things that are required in sync with nature. So that is my understanding. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mukta ji. And it was a pleasure to meet you then. And thank you, all the panelists. I'm trying to sum up what each one of us has said. And to start with, what Mukta ji really emphasized is the last man in the queue, and that it is all about being human-centric and keeping that in mind, institutionalizing whatever we do so that it is not personality-driven, and it says that in the institutional memory so that it can be carried on beyond the time limit of a particular administration or who is running the show. And then going back to what Ashok was saying, I think Ashok emphasized on two things very clearly. A deep awareness of the relationship between the system and what we're actually trying to do. And if the benefits can actually filter down again to the last man, and if we can focus in that and be conscious in every act of our thought process, in design thinking, in the making of the building, can we constantly be aware of that fact? And thank Shikha for bringing out two things about the fact that our cities at some point of time were always sustainable, and that we have deviated in the past, and the macro level issues are getting neglected and have in a way broken down. And what we are actually doing is fixing those macro levels. And have we done enough, or there's so much more to do? And then what Chetan was trying to explain are the SDG goals and the definition of the UN that sets up for the global platform, and each country who is a signatory to these SDG goals that defines what is sustainability. And that COVID, we come face to face with reality, and which is again what Mukta ji was saying, that our rivers are cleaner and water bodies are cleaner, and the air is, I was yesterday 36 PM10, which is unbelievable in Delhi. And I really love what Vaibhav has been saying and doing and I read up what you've been doing. We haven't met yet. The fact of how to make sustainable clothing, and this whole concept of the amount of energy that is required to make this, the making of a fabric, a sari, a textile, and where do you get your material from? What is the waste that is generated? What is the life cycle span of a clothing? Will it end up in a landfill? And how do we reuse? And how do we actually, you're not saying it directly, but you're hinting, how do you reduce our consumption? You know, because our natural resources are limited. And I remember my mother inheriting only one expensive pashmina shawl, but my wardrobe is full. Where do we draw the line? More than we couldn't hear you clearly, but I understand that your concerns are laid in the tradition and making of the craft and arts, and how we have lost that. And can we bring that sensitivity? And I think all of us are talking about, from Mukherjee, Wiley to our show, about livelihoods. Can the person, the last man, benefit in this whole process? Is it human centric? Are our policies human centric? So if that's I think what we're concerned about. One end is to build consciously, as much as possible in tune with nature, optimize the resources, and use minimal energy. On the other hand, we're all talking about social equity, its benefits reaching down to everyone, and that lays down the context, what is Indian context in a sense, and what Chetan was saying, you can't have a solution which is point blank. It can't be one solution for the whole country with such diverse issues and ecologies and needs and diversity. We need to have local solutions while the issues are same and similar. Madhura, you want to?
Yes. Thank you, Architect Akshay. The next question is for Mugdha Madam. Sustainability has been a priority of government policy for last 20 years. As an administrator and government representative, we are interested to know, where do designers come in this larger canvas of India's sustainability goals?
Okay, that's an interesting question, I must say. But I think maybe because we are doing a panel, I need to reiterate what we have been doing in the last 1 year. You are absolutely right. And in many ways, I think governments are realizing, but maybe probably not, in the manner that we'd like, by holding that placard called, focus attention on design. But I think in their own small ways, it is happening. The Harvard University teaches a course, and some of the officers, including me, have been made to attend that course, which talks about evidence-based smart policy making, right? So it is not, governments are not attuned, are not aware. So as far as awareness about, how design is conceptually important is there, because even all of us in our own, we design our budgets, we design our lifestyles, we design our, so many things we design without even knowing that we are working towards an academic concept called design. This design thing it's almost like breathing, I would say. You're breathing until somebody tells you that do pranayama. You don't even think that, oh, I've been breathing. All 24 hours, one is continuously breathing without realizing it. So design is as important as embedded, and as it's happening in its natural course. But now what is important is that because we have moved so away from nature, it becomes very, very important to bring the subject back, to retrieve it from where it has got lost. So let me say that we recognized it, and I'm glad that we were able to bring all the design and planning and architecture schools of Rajasthan and Jaipur together on a single platform. And today I'm very, very happy to say that after 1 year, 1 years of hard work of this design cohort, which has been working with the government. See, when we designed this design cohort, we did not keep it sarkari, and I'm deliberately using the word government as sarkari, because it is everything. Just like design begins in the mind, the confidence building measure also happens when the government is able to reach out to the stakeholders. See, our job is to make policy, but the policy has to be made for a stakeholder. So we have to understand the requirements of the stakeholder. Even when we are doing a product design or a building design, so two things we have to remember when we are doing, and government is now slowly but steadily understanding it. One is the importance of the stakeholder in the design. The second is, what is the outcome that you are expecting from the design that you are doing? What is the problem of society or of individual that design is going to solve? What is it going to do? So when you talk of sustainability, when you talk of designing of government policies, we were taught that when you are designing a government policy, objectives should be very crisp and very few. You should not try to kill many birds with one stone, because then it becomes, and also that you must allow the data to speak to you. You should not manipulate the data to speak what you want it to do. Rather, the data should speak to you. And thirdly, that the outcomes of the policy should be identified, and those should also be few in number. They should also be, what you say, a qualitative methodology of assessing the outcomes. So if you are building, say a building, if you are drawing a building and you want to give large houses and large parking space, and this is only what you have, how can you build it? So I think designing is a lot about observation and thinking out of the box to solve a particular problem. That the fact that we are solving a problem, that core objective should never be lost. So identifying and defining a problem statement becomes very important. Just like in research, you have to define a problem statement. I think design, when you are talking to your clients, be it the governments or be it the designers, the concept should be very clear. And what is it that the two of you together in partnership are trying to do, and what is it that you are thinking will be an outcome, and what will be the timelines? So I think government, at least in Rajasthan, I can say with great satisfaction, especially after yesterday, our design conclave having been launched at the highest level of the Honorable Chief Minister, that the government recognizes that design is absolutely essential. It is a fulcrum around which all policy making of any kind, everything, be it energy efficiency. See, you can't have energy, you can get a certification. Also, let me say something. Just like there is an awe of technology, there is also this fetish, I would say, of getting certifications, ISO certification, some other certification, and then you find that these certifications have lost, what you say, its credibility, for the simple reason that even when things are not fully compliant, people are getting certifications. So I think it is up to us that you should also identify what can be done. Madam would understand, Mojani madam, because she deals with textiles, and somebody also spoke about textiles. See, there are two kind of things. When you are designing a cloth or maybe a garment, you can take a fresh piece of cloth and design afresh. But you can also applique work, right? If the cloth has faded so much that you cannot do an applique, and if you try to do an applique, you will fail, because wo kapda jhir jayega, right? It will not have the strength. So you have to have the foresight to be able to discard a policy if it's lost relevance and build a fresh. right, also change with the time. I think government is totally in tune, and I'm very, very happy. And in fact, I'm very grateful, I would say, that in the last 1 year, my own learning curve of the various facets of design, architecture, and planning has improved in the August company of all the esteemed members of the design cohort. I have learned lots from interactions with them and also from such panel discussions. And I hope to keep learning to improve the government's interaction with designers, architects, heritage conservationists, and also the design students. So thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. And please be assured, as a representative, a very humble representative of the government of Rajasthan, let me assure you that at least in Rajasthan, we will ensure that design continues to remain fundamental to our way of thinking, especially in the way that we design policies for our stakeholders and work in coordination with stakeholders, be it public institutions, be it private institutions. Science has taught me that a researcher or an innovator or a designer can be born anywhere, can be even a rural innovator with no educational qualification. So I think I'm very, very grateful, and I thank this esteemed panel for Madhura ji and Anuradha ji for putting this together. Thank you very, very much. People, I think, need to hear more, and I'm listening to everybody. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Over to Akshay, sir.
I don't feel that sustainability is overrated. I feel that it's very important. It's relevant every single moment, and that we need to actually break it down into very simple terms, because it's required at every single decision-making level, and that's what I feel very, very, very strongly about it. I will leave with that and then come back later once the other panelists.
Yeah, thank you. Next question is for Professor Chetan Vaidya. As an academician and member of several policy planning committees in the government, how do you integrate sustainability in design education, especially with new education policy?
Thank you, Madhuraji. Thank you, your university. And thank you, Mrs. Sinha, DST Rajasthan. And she spoke so well. I think our professors are going to lose their jobs. I'm scared. No, you asked, let me start with design education, which is teaching theory and application of products, services, and environment. And that is our understanding of design education. It could be products, it could be services, it could be buildings, it could be city plans, I mean, at different levels, but we all have same principles of design and sustainability. And that's a common thread. And MHRD has a manifesto called Design Education Manifesto in 2014, which was important to integrate design in all the NITs and IITs to begin with, and now also several other universities. That's how design education started. It was not, otherwise it was limited only to 3 or 4 IITs and NITs. And in this, nature and culture becomes very important part of design education. I think this is mentioned in different ways by different speakers. But I think we need to keep that in mind. And I also want to take you back to what is called an EMS report, the report by Charles Hamlin's wife, where he appreciated our design of Lota and Matka. I mean, something we take for granted, but because he was an outsider, he really appreciated our design of Matka and Lota and how it is relevant to Indian design education. And that is also the basis of formation of NID, National Institute of Design, and several other institutes. Traditionally, as an urban planner, I know, traditionally our cities were designed to keep topography into mind, the nature into mind. You know, there were forests left in this. There were idea of a central city and how the geography it takes care of it. Unfortunately, we have stopped thinking of geography as part of designing cities, and that is why we are resulting in all over. I'm getting calls from all kind of TV channel to speak on urban flooding, but this is what I've spoken for last 3 years, and nothing happening. Jaipur also had those problems, and different cities have those problems of urban flooding. So, how does this kind of design education, your central question from you, in the new education policy? I think new education policy gives us flexibility and makes us work from hands. I think that is the focus of the new education policy and is very relevant for design education. We will improve design education under the new education policy. And the 4 or 5 things with the design, the new education policy is saying administratively, single regulator, multiple entry, common entrance, low stake board exams. I think all that becomes extremely important for design education, specifically in architecture where we have a 5-year course. And I really think we started in School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, that you can join after 3 years, leave for 2 or 3 years, go out, work, come back, and then do your final BH. And this is true for all the other designs. So I think new education policy is going to be very positive for design education. And lastly, one point Madam Sinha made about in her previous presentation on institutionalization is like sustainability. I think it's extremely important that whatever we do, it doesn't become personal specific. It gets institutionalized in the system, and that needs to be focused in design education also. Thank you, Madhuraji, for this.
Thank you, sir. I absolutely agree with you that we need to collaborate with each other, like institutions, then all stakeholders like community also, researcher, and then government organizations. And as you mentioned that we have seen even Jaipur city was also flooded because of rains. And we need to focus on this. And I remember this science of human settlements, equistics. So we need to again revive and teach our students, and then not teach only, we have to take it into practice. And the research has to be with the community. It is not that sitting in an institution, I should take a research topic or I should take a hypothesis. We should go to the community, and as Mugdha madam says, we should be able to solve the problems of the community. Thank you very much, sir. Next question is for Dr. Shikha Jain and Mugdha Sinha ma'am. Considering the UN declarations and currently government policies, how sustainability can be integrated into design practice? Dr. Shikha Jain.
Okay. So again, a very relevant question, of course, because sustainability is a big agenda with UN bodies today, and UNESCO says that culture is the key to, our human identity, and whatever we cannot achieve sustainability without cultural sustainability. Professor Vedya mentioned about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, but there are 4 specifically that mention culture and its role. In linking with sustainability. And I think a lot of points have already been touched upon by Professor Vedya and Mugdha ji in, cultural sustainability also, and also by earlier panelists on crafts. But primarily, if we are looking at design practice or say conservation practice, which I'm used to. We are looking at cultural sustainability linking with the environment. So we are looking at not culture or heritage on its own, but it's, something that is created on the canvas of nature. So the natural resources where it is set in, the context, that becomes very critical. In practice, I mean, we don't just look at conserving a particular building, it's part of a larger context. So the cultural landscape approach is very essential. It is also a part of a social context. And fortunately, in places like Rajasthan, we still have the traditional crafts and the traditional sustainable means of creating things and how they can innovate. There are institutes of crafts and design that are working on together with them. And that's why UNESCO, like Jaipur is a city of creative arts and folk art realized by UNESCO, and they specifically link the crafts and creativity with master planning. So that is something that is a new perspective which has come in now. And in our practice, wherever we are looking at city level or even at crafts, it's not just looking at the crafts person, but also his habitat and the setting which is it is in, and looking at long-term city's development. So that's a component that UN is very emphatic on now. And their new designation for UNESCO for creative city of craft, folk art, or gastronomy, all these need to be linked with sustainable development goals and planning. So that's one area that one needs to look. I mean, we are definitely looking at the social sustainability, linking crafts, traditional technology, conservation, and Rajasthan is one area which has become a role model for that in practicing in conservation with traditional materials. It's all across the nation. I mean, if there is some conservation going on, you would find the art crafts people from Rajasthan working across and teaching or training, which is a good learning. And even historically, it used to happen. And lastly, I think looking at, because where we face challenge in cultural or heritage perspective is when it comes to economic sustainability, which of course is always a priority with the most people and clients, and it's difficult to convince them that we need to look at culture, environment, quality, and social aspect first. So in that sense, the cultural sustainability also addresses what Mugdha ji already mentioned about the cyclic aspect, turning over the things. So recycling of old buildings, rather than, of course, creativity is one aspect, but we are also looking at how it could be adaptive reuse in most cases. What is already created, how it can be reused, and then it links to long-term economic sustainability. Thank you.
Yeah. Over to Mugdha ma'am for the same question. Should I repeat question? Unmute.
Why don't you repeat the question?
Yeah. Considering the UN declarations and currently government policies, how sustainability can be integrated into design practice?
Okay. I think that's a relevant question to ask, because the how is very, very useful, because we've agreed on the fact that it is necessary. We've agreed on the why and the what and stuff like that. So how becomes very important. And I think I'll just mention three things, based on what I've heard here and what I think. Also pick up from where Shikhaji left, because Shikhaji spoke about creativity, right? So I think from conceptualization to creativity via some kind of creation, that is one. But how do you do it actually? You do it by capacity building of the people you work with. And when I say capacity building, as designers, as academicians, you are working, of course, exactly in the same manner as scientists are working in the silos of their laboratories, right? So my request to you is that you must train the government, right? Capacity building, which includes the officers, which also includes not just the civil servants, but also people below that rank, which is at the cutting edge level. If you talk of construction, you must also train the people who are the contractors, who are the masons. Hana? We must do these kind of courses. And just one example, why this capacity building? See, for officers, capacity building has to be more conceptually organized, so they understand, why frescoes need to be preserved. Hana? Why, if something is made in lime and chuna, you cannot cement it, even if it is a quicker job. For the construction workers and contractors, you have to have a different alignment, the same thing delivered in a different manner. So that becomes very, very important. And then I think apart from capacity building and everything, I think another very important stakeholder is the ultimate consumer, the civil society. What happens is that sometimes we are able to partner, the public sector and the private sector are able to partner beautifully. But the point is that we have to also partner with the citizenry, that we have to move beyond public-private to public-private citizenry. है ना? Because the people who are staying in those heritage buildings, है ना, they come from different class, our expectations and their abilities need to match. है ना? So willingness and ability both need to come together. There might be willingness, there might not be ability. So I think those things have to happen, and I think an outreach, because these are very intellectual, academic concepts, they need to become public. Public ownership of design is going to also put pressure on the governments and smoothen the path for academicians, for policy makers and implementers, and because it is going to be owned by the citizenry at large, the civil society at large. So I think huge amount of what you say, communication, like we do in science communication, demystification of a lot of things, and also maybe you should, as science is also already doing, you should be in sync with the government policies, be it the state government or be it the central government, what the government is announcing in the budget. Anna, what is the vision of the government? I think designers should also learn to work in tandem with that and look for opportunities within the scope of that, so that the financial constraints which you feel working in the government can also get eased out. These are my very, very simple solutions of how we can smoothen the process of collaboration based on my experience of working with the design cohort for the last 1 year. And I think if we are able to do this capacity building of civil servants, civil society, and people at large, and also the kind of PhDs. If your PhDs can become historical policy documents and not just something which people are doing for the sake of a degree, I think, and if those PhDs can feed into policy making, I think that will be something that I will think is part of a circular economy, where our concept, our training of evidence-based policy making will get strengthened and empowered by the kind of academic work that is happening in your universities. And I need to understand it conceptually. It will take some time. So don't lose faith if you have one bad experience working with us, but continue to work, continue to teach us. Okay, continue. We will learn from each other. You need to learn how the governments work, and we need to learn from you, your academic, your research understanding. But this partnership needs to go on and on till both. And I'm emphasizing this because we are two different people. Just like in a marriage, you have to make the marriage work. This is a marriage, and we have to make this marriage work because we are both working for the same public and for the same civil society. And in fact, we are all working for ourselves because we live in the same society. And it doesn't matter, because if floods come, they don't see that this is the house of an IS officer, this is the house of Madhuraji or somebody. The floods don't see that, right? So I think we are all working for ourselves, and we must make that contribution because it is essential for our own well-being and the well-being of the society in general. So thank you. I think that is what I have to say.
Now, next question is for architect Ashok Lal. As a practicing architect and academic researcher, do you feel sustainability is overrated or overstudied? And what is a sensible way to teach and practice sustainability in architecture?
Well, I think there is a strong reaction to this feeling that it might be overrated and overstudied. Definitely underrated. It is understood superficially, even when it is included in our curricula and our course material. I'm afraid our faculty do not have a depth of understanding of the fundamental concepts that we're dealing with. And despite many years of work by different people who have tried to develop course material and exemplified how sustainability can be integrated into design learning. It is not a supplementary subject. It is not a, one of those, the elective subject. It is not even a postgraduate studies specialization. It is integral to design, every kind of design. So these concepts, you need to think from the theoretical structure of design education. Just as we have in architectural design, we have a balance between humanities, science and engineering, and design, creative design. We try to marry these things together and knit them together as subjects that come together for design. Within that, embedded in, say, humanities, is the whole notion of tradition and crafts. It is the whole notion of the histories of concepts and knowledge. And I must say, I want to come back to this question of how design is central, not only as a synthesizing process.
I think
it gives expression, the joy, So sustainability as a technical subject, sustainability is something that informs the production of beauty and joy, and with a deeper understanding of life. That is what has to be transmitted to our students. And I think that a lot of work has to be done in that direction. I would also like to just emphasize a couple of things about design learning and design. Sustainability comes together. It's this, that design is by definition multi-dimensional. It is not like an arithmetic problem, the HCF or solve this equation. It is a multi-dimensional activity and brings together many soft as well as hard aspects of highly specialized skill. And good design is how, taking account of all the specializations of technicalities and economics, for instance, or development on the side, you are still able to produce an environment, an object, a product which enlivens the quality of life. Talks to people, talks of, engages their imagination. I think that is the way we should be looking at teaching of sustainability and inclusion of that in our courses. I'm afraid at the moment it is very, very superficial. We have a long way to go.
Thank you. I totally agree with you, sir. It is not a separate subject. It is an integral part of our design. And let it be design of anything, a product or a building or a cloth. I think we need to understand the design is contextual. And if we respond to major things like culture, resources, or climate of the place, then we can do the justice. I request Architect Akshay Kaul to address the same question. Should I repeat the question?
Yeah.
As a practicing architect and academic researcher, do you feel sustainability is overrated or overstudied? And what is a sensible way to teach practice in sustainability in architecture?
I completely agree with what Ashok is saying. My problem is that with architectural education and practice both, that as architects, we live in our own bubble, which has nothing to do with the reality around us. We completely are ignorant about the society in which we live. The whole education is designed to create this architect who's next to the door. And we end up serving not even 1% of the society. And we are serving one client. That's about all who can afford us. And so the whole education is so lopsided that, we live in a bubble and we don't realize that all the other professions, whether it is science, whether it is law, or any other profession, they have caught up. And we are nowhere. Are the SDG goals part of our education? No, nothing to do with it. And so we're way off the architect as the master creator of the universe. And just look at the simple notion. Do we have enough water to feed our people? No. Do we have clean air? Do we have enough soil to produce food? Why doesn't the architect concern about this in the making and placing of the building? You know, if we can't see this relationship between the air we breathe and the building that we make and the material that is coming from the same soil, we don't see this connection and we're not taught. And the central focus, it's very frustrating for me as a practitioner of landscape architect, because the starting point is the style in architecture. It has nothing to do with the reality, you know. Whereas the students, when they come to the college, they blank slate. They are highly motivated in the first years. They are charged. We don't have the training capacity to deliver to them, nor are our practices tailored in that manner. So they are left high and dry when they come. So I think it is very important to establish a link between our lungs and the trees, and by cutting the trees and using the material for construction. If we don't see this basic connection, then we are nowhere. We need to understand that if we have water, we have food, and that is very critical for us. You know, the very simple, where is the wastewater going from? Our buildings. None of us know, because that affects the health of all the other people down the drain. The day we construct, the day we make a boundary wall on the side, we have killed the soil forever. It cannot be reconstructed, and so we have destroyed. So unless we make this very simple connection, unless we're able to explain this knowledge, unless we demonstrate this through our work, we are going nowhere. We are on a destructive path. As a small social club of architects socializing and, you know, patting our backs, we are not going anywhere with this notion of, to me, the sustainability word is a misnomer. You know, buildings can never be sustainable. Cities can never be sustainable. And Ashok knows that we work together on the Living Cities Design Competition. When you cannot produce energy to consume, we live in a 600-acre project outside Jaipur. We cannot produce food for the people. So my problem is that the notion of sustainability of nature, like Ashok is saying, is on the fringes. Unless it is the starting point of our design thinking, we are not going anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for Vaibhavi and Dr. Vaibhavi and Dr. Mojgan. How can we revive sustainable practices in fashion where there are many social and livelihood related challenges? For example, how can silk be revived when land for mulberry plantation is not protected? Dr. Vaibhavi.
Hello, everyone. So we're all aware about, things like faster and faster production and, faster and faster consumption. But when we talk about sustainable design, again, it goes back to the entire process in which how the production of fashion happens, of production of clothing happens, and that needs to be revisited and relooked. I'm fully aware when I'm talking about the fashion industry is rated as one of the highest polluters in the world. So all that needs to be relooked, and this is maybe not for the experts but for the students who are attending the webinar, that you are all aware that there is a concept called fast fashion, faster and faster production and faster consumption. But when we talk about taking a pause and looking at the entire process more carefully and slowing down that process and making sure that there is a design intervention at every level, right from farming of the fibers from which the fabric is made, the processes involved in making that fabric, how does it affect our environment, how does it affect the people who are making it, what is the product life cycle of that product, whether there a need in the society for that kind of a product that you're designing. So all that needs to be understood, and it's a very, very crucial role and responsibility of the design community when you're trying to bring out solutions which will impact the environment, it will impact livelihoods, it will impact also the health and condition of the people who are making it, as well as people who are wearing it. And why don't we look at educating people towards the merits of consuming less but a well-made, good quality garment that will have a longer use, and people have personalized stories associated with that. And there are various ways in which this could address, and I don't have that much time to address all of it right now, but very simply put, there needs to be a very, very close attention to every process that is involved in making of clothes, and making sure that there is a lot of what do you say, integrity, a lot of understanding, and an ability to innovate at every level, so that there is the entire process contributes towards the circular design innovation. Also, other panelists like Shikha Jain have explicitly talked about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And when we talk about a country such as India, we have such a huge potential of the traditional artisanal craft skills, where nowhere in the world would you find such a wide variety of textiles, from the finest of mulls and the muslins and the jamdanis to the coarsest of fabrics used for carpeting and household for durries and upholsteries and curtains. And all of this is include using heritage craft skill. And again, the way the mass production of fashion looks, the way it looks at production needs to be addressed in the way that you value the artisanal skill that is involved, the uniqueness of each and every product that is involved in it. And this gives a huge potential for the Indian fashion industry to contribute towards making fashion more meaningful, and educating people to take a pause and take mindful decisions towards their wardrobes and tell unique artisanal stories.
Thank you, Dr. Vaibhavi. Over to Pramod Gan.
Yeah, well, I should say my thanks first to you, Dr. Mathura, to invite me to join this panel. I am really happy to be with some people from Jaipur, from Rajasthan, and I am telling you my warm hello from Iran. Well, with my experiences, I mean, in living and working in India, I became a little bit familiar with what is going on and designing in India a little bit, especially in the academic place. And living in Jaipur actually was a very, very good experience for me, because Jaipur is very close to Iran. I mean, it was very understandable for me to feel Jaipur and what's going on in the artistic atmosphere in the Jaipur and in the academic place of the, I mean, like IICD, which I work, and I had some experiences. Like many other speakers refers also in this panel, I want to mention two very important options of the nature and tradition, which is very, very important for any kind of design. I mean, and to find out about even the design concept itself. because I mean, if we think about this period of life itself, it's something, but I think we need to have a really larger view. We have a long tradition, 2,000, 3,000 years, and we are following the same route, you know. So it's better we don't think any stop in this. Many things changed even in this, with this virus situation. We have seen many things we are not able to do today, even compared to the last years back. But I mean, in the Asian societies like us, like Iran, like India, or even I have seen Japan, in Indonesia, in many, we have very, very wonderful tradition which has a great knowledge, and also the nature. So I'm thinking any kind of design which we need to think, or especially the sustainable design, we need really to go back to our tradition, and we need to go back to our nature to study well about them, because the tradition itself tells us which kind of design is good and is sustainable, you know, which kind of design survived for thousands of years in our societies. So if we go, for example, which kind of clothes, which kind of fabric, kind of plate, which kind of carpet, walls, decorated, anything. So it means we can find about the good designing for thousand years in our societies. We can find about the favor and taste of the people. When something survives, when one design survives for of years, it means it has excellent design, you know. And what is the favor and taste of the people in our societies? That is also very important. For example, for the centuries, some design were existed between Iran and India. They had great and really huge trades in making fabrics and making different of prints and perde and something. So that shows that was a wonderful design for us for centuries. So if we want to make a new design, which is sustainable and which is good for our societies, which has a good quality, we need to go back to the tradition and look at it again and study it well, carefully. And our nature, I mean, it should be localized. In every nature has different usage, has different tastes, different needs. And I'm also thinking about this kind of mass production, which we started to follow some of the Western countries. I think it doesn't work for us. We didn't do right to follow that, because we need really to rethink, do we need really such kind of mass production, the huge number and low quality? We really don't need that kind. We are the people who think about the value. We lost the value of our production. Even we lost the value of our life. Now, if I want to go and find some good fabric or some good handicrafts even, it's very difficult to find it in the compared to the past. So I think we have two good, wonderful things, nature and tradition. We need to go back to them. And as you said very, very nicely, we need to go and work in the nature and with the tradition, not only study and in the classes. We need to put them in work. We need to study from the jackets which our grandmother wore, or even some plate we had from many years ago in our cabin, or many things which we can see in the Pink City in the Jaipur now. And then we will find out about the best way which makes a sustainable design. It helps us in production and in education in both sides. And that's the way we have. We need to find our needs, and we need to delete something which we did mistake in making them and damage the nature.
Thank you. Next question is for Dr. Shikha Jain. As a conservation architect, what role sustainability plays in your professional work? Moreover, how to conserve heritage when the conservation materials and skills are hard to find?
Okay, so sustainability, of course, is definitely a key, because it's also the basis of cultural heritage conservation, which I practice, and already explained a bit on how, we are looking at more of a focus within the context on environmental and social sustainability. So your other question regarding the traditional materials or challenges, I think, that is the most interesting aspects that we have found in our practice, because we've worked with a lot of craftspeople. We've documented stone crafts in across Rajasthan, worked with practitioners in line, documented all the creative crafts of Jaipur, and it was a great learning experience, because it's when you're talking to these craftspeople, you actually understand, the true nature of sustainability and also creativity in that sense. So I think it's just an impression, that materials are not available or craftspeople are not available. But if you go and try and find them, and then you build a sort of capacity building program where you actually get the master craftspeople to train others, this is one aspect I think we need to focus on. And I've seen it happening in my practice. When it was 2005-6 that government of Rajasthan had some major conservation projects like the Amer Fort, and then later on, within the city, conservation works that were carried out. And that used to be, as a conservation, I used to wonder what would be, a dream project. And I thought the way, you build new cities in concrete, if I could visualize a complete historic city being conserved with traditional materials, that would be a dream. And I actually saw that happening in 2013-14, when the Jaipur bazaars were taken, across for conservation, and now Smart City is again extending it to 9 more bazaars. So that's what our historic cities need. And this crisis that you talk about, craftspeople, it exists, but it can be plugged in, because when, in Rajasthan, it's already, you have enough craftspeople and skilled people now who know about traditional materials and techniques used in conservation. But I've seen the cases when I was practicing in Punjab, or I've seen the case when, Aga Khan, my colleague, Mr. Ratish Nanda, was practicing in Qutub Shahi, so down in Hyderabad, where there was a lack of skills and knowledge about these materials. And then there were these craftspeople, or, one skilled master craftsman who was brought from Rajasthan, and then the local ones were trained. And in Punjab, I saw when we were practicing under 13 Finance Commission, there were 22 monuments that were being conserved. And within a period of 3 to 4 years, actually that knowledge was transferred. And today you will see that Punjab has its own team of contractors and skilled craftspeople, who can work with traditional materials. And similar, aspects we've seen in practicing on a fort conservation in Andhra, where there is a knowledge exchange that is required. So I think the way to go forward is you find out where that knowledge exists. It is in the nooks and corners of our city, of our country. We need to find it. We need to ensure that that knowledge is transferred to the next generation, and also, architects who are practicing today, even to them. And then how it is, spread out and more people are trained, and it can really be the right field for conservation and cultural heritage. And most of, my contemporaries are practicing this, so I know that a lot of knowledge exists, and craftsmanship is something that is really now being nurtured in India in various practices.
Thank you. Next question is for architect Ashok Lal and architect Akshay Kaul. Do we have a true Indian model of sustainable development? Do we need one? Architect Ashok Lal and architect Akshay Kaul. Yeah.
Ashok.
You can start. Yes.
Yeah. So I think while the issues are globally similar, they vary because of the context, and the context is both natural, social, and I think economic. and we are challenged because we have about 17% of global population in a very tiny piece of land, which is going on increasing substantial. So our models have to be very unique because 50% of the country goes without one meal every single day. 70% of the country doesn't have wastewater treatment. Huge amount of land is every day getting degraded, and you will not be able to produce food for the people. And in this whole story, the person who suffers most, because it's all tied, the environment very closely tied with society, and in the society, the person who gets most affected are women and children. So what is this sustaining model? I think in our country, we really need to take a close look, and it's simply about, I've concluded, it's simply about first getting the basic water, clean water to every house, simple sanitary, because their health of the marginalized, the weakest, and the poor is directly affected with the discharge of wastewater in the water bodies and in the groundwater. And they take huge loans for fertilizer and seeds, and they generate our food and end up committing suicide because they have to repay the loan. So our model has to be working at many levels. It can't work. So in that sense, Gandhi's model of a basic minimum reaching out to every single man, while you are as a whole hierarchy of affordability and people who then practice it at different scales in different contexts, both naturally and culturally. So I think that's what, and it's very important of the work that Vaibhavi and Mojgan and Shikha are doing, because life people down there in the society get most effect. It's also these people who actually build up the society, and our houses are built by these craftsmen. Our food is provided by these craftsmen. Our textiles are made by these people. Our carpets, our saris. So they are the one. If we can't take care of that, then we can't take care of sustainability. So that model is very critical, because there is I know so many people who are giving up crafts and taking architectural education instead, or a blue collar job working in oil, simply because of the gap. So that's my take on the Indian cortex. Has very unique. It has to be people oriented, craft oriented, design oriented, and nature is the starting point and the end point of.
Thank you. Next question is for Dr. Vaibhavi and Dr. Mojgan. As educators and professionals, how do you define sustainable fashion? And how do you position it in the modern socio-economic context where the entire industrial production process is polluting the environment? Yes, Dr. Vaibhavi.
Hello?
Hello, yeah.
So, would Professor Mozgan like to go ahead first?
Sure. No, please. I'm following you. It's fine.
Sure.
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think, coming back to what you asked me, I started a bit in my earlier, a bit as well, where we're talking about mass production and the perils of it and how we can address all of that by taking a closer look at design intervention right from farm to grave life cycle of a fashion product. And I think uh, as an Indian design community or as a fashion industry, I think there is a huge, huge potential for involving a lot of skilled people, making sure that they live a life of dignity and making sure that there are sustainable livelihoods. And more than that, sustaining the heritage of our country through the craft skills and applying it in a contemporary lifestyle. I think that's very, very crucial for these craft techniques to be uh, taken forward and having a sustainable and a meaningful livelihood. So in my practice as a slow fashion designer, that's the whole idea, like something like a sari, a garment like a sari, which has survived for more than 5,000 years. And it intrigues you as to how it becomes relevant with such changing times and lifestyle and the role of women that has changed for a few of us, and for few it's still a long way to go, but it still remains a very, very contemporary part of lifestyle, and it's not relegated to a museum piece. When you go back to the materiality of it and then you try and understand that, and of course you've embraced so many different kind of garments in your wardrobe and your lifestyle is changing, but there is still a lot of scope for one to embrace the craft techniques and co-design with artisans. So again, when you say it's not just sourcing fabrics or craft techniques, but giving them that dignity and working closely with them and impacting a better design solution, I think that's very, very important. And one size does not fit all, so it will have to be very, very specific industry sectors that we are looking at and taking steps towards making it more sustainable. So whether it is our home linen and house furnishing, whether it is infants clothing, whether it is clothes that you wear for weddings, whether clothes that you wear for everyday wear, and make sure that the entire product life cycle of that garment is well understood and there is value added at each stage for it to become more meaningful for the earth, the wearer, as well as the maker.
Thank you. Over to Dr. Mojgan.
Yes, in following of Dr. Babhavi, I'm also want to focus on the mass production. I think that's something we really need to stop. I mean, especially in our societies. With mass production, I think we lost the value and quality. We lost the good living, inner designing, good living to ourselves, to our nature, to our production, to our designing and everything, because when with this kind of mass production, which you can see, there are many brands in everywhere in the world now. In every single big city in the world you go now, you can see many brands which even you cannot go, and they have a very, very low quality in making fashion, in even stitching material, making clothes. Do we need them really? I mean, is not a good clothing, is not production they do. I really don't want to wear that. If you look at, for example, in Japan, I've seen many times that when you look at the mother, I mean, the wearing of the mother, which are elder, I mean, they are adopted and they are used to wear the really good clothing. And when you look at their daughter, is totally different the way their makeup they sell. So, I mean, all these things, we really lost the value and quality. of making production and the quality of behaving to the nature. If we don't need such kind of mass production, we don't need such kind of factory and a facility to make them, you know. So the handlooms are something. We know this, the society changed, the number of the people are increasing, we need more production. Yes, but that is not a way to make such kind of huge number of the massive. So we really need to rethink, we need to remake something which has the quality and value. We are the people in Asia, we are the people we used to have the quality things. I mean, if we look at our grandmother or all our past generation, we still have kimono, we still have their saris, we still have their, because it has the quality. Why I should have the 100 numbers of clothes with low quality? So I think we need to go back to our traditional behaving, to make the valuable things to stay longer, and don't damage the, I mean, to appreciate it more, to enjoy of it more. When I'm wearing something really valuable, I personally enjoy it more, I mean, as a woman or as a human. So we missed all of these things, which is not correct, and it doesn't work in our Asian societies. And as our traditional and our history showed already, for 1,000 and 2,000, 3,000 years, we know how to make valuable things. So we need just to go back. And I think you in India, as I have seen in Jaipur especially, you are very, very good in that. I mean, still India is one of the excellent country in making the handlooms in fabric and so many things which we lost in Iran. You have it in India, and I really appreciate it always. So I think that is the way we need to rethink. We don't need such kind of mass production to make pollution, to make, I mean, we can make enough job for our people. We need to go back and rethink about our nature and the value. And then when we think in, I mean, when we look at well again in our tradition, in our nature, then we will find out how to behave to ourselves and our nature, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. The next question is for Professor Chetan Vaidya. As a nation of 1.3 billion, do we have the skill and expertise to deal with this challenge of sustainability? How challenging it is to educate the technology-driven future generation with the necessary skills to face the future?
I think before I get into the issue of availability of professionals, I want to bring to your notice, to the readers, that urban has to change. We need to reimagine urban planning. It would, particularly in the context of disasters and COVID and other things, we will need, first thing we will need is a very strong urban information system. We need a data-driven, evidence-based decision making, not intuition. I mean, all planning, unfortunately, has been intuition-based in India. We really want to change it data-driven, based on evidence, which also links with your point of information technology. We need to improve the communication with the officials, private sector, communication with citizens. And in this context, we want to review this model of high density mixed land use linked to public transport. We also need to review the minimum standards for housing, because housing needs good open spaces. So you need walkability, you need cycling, you need non-motorized transport. This is being promoted. And there's a mayor in Paris who is trying to develop it.
Battery might discharge. Need to connect.
We were talking of 15 minutes city in Paris, and also I'm told Rajasthan government is thinking of that. All this requires a different kind of planning approach. Fortunately, in recent past, through Amrit mission of Government of India, we have started working using technology for preparing master plan and local area plan, which is called a GIS-based master plan. Very positive thing which has happened in the planning field. Positive is that we are now getting our land use plans quicker, much more perfect. We have city level plans, we also have thematic plans. Very positive. But now what we require is active
Put it on the chair.
participation of the citizens and visualization of how the cities will be. That is which is missing. And that is the kind of professional which is missing. So we'll require different kind of training, different kind of capacity building for architects, urban planners, physical designers. And that requires it's not just technology which is it's a technology which is called as the human face with understanding of stakeholder participation and visualization of new city for a sustainable city design. I think I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Now I request Architect Akshay Kaul to summarize the discussion.
I think what is very evident is that at the moment, the notion of sustainability or designing with nature in any of these professions, whether it's city planning, architecture, landscape, fashion, or conservation, or not so much conservation, is still on the fringes, and it is not necessarily the starting point. And like Muktaji was saying, that you need to revise the policy constantly and to do a check-in process all the time. We reached a point of breakdown, and unless we address this issue immediately, we are getting to a point of no return. So making design with nature, planning with nature, fashion with nature, as a center starting conscious, deep awareness, thoughtful process, we will end up with a crisis. I think that's one thing very clear. And what is also required is, I think everyone is saying that, and COVID has given us the opportunity, is can we pause? Can we look at what has worked in the past? And can we reset the button for the future? So if we are talking about minimizing consumption, reducing mass production, giving value to what we have, whether it is nature, whether it is a building and adapting reuse, whether it's a product of heritage. So that's the point when we kind of need to do. And two more points that I think which have come up when it is very central. It is about livelihood. It is about equity, giving dignity and empowering people across the cross section of the society in the process of design. And in order to do that, to make this shift where sustainability is on the periphery and making it the starting point, we need to do capacity building. And like Mugdha, you were saying, right from the policy maker to our co-faculty and peers and students and the people who are going to implement it, which is what Shik has been saying, to look for them in the nooks and corners of the country and bring them together and start the capacity building process at different level. And that is what Chetan is also saying, bringing GIS as a center, starting mapping as the most data and evidence-based process. And that adds to what Mukdaji said, is when you are doing any of this, do you have data? Do you have evidence? And can we have evidence-based policy making? But this is what I want to add to what Ashok said. that it's not limited to being technical. Can we bring the human emotion? Can we bring humanities? Can we bring celebration and joy in this whole process of improving the life and making nature as the starting point for design? So I think that's where I think it comes together.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all the panelists for providing us with a very intriguing session. I now request Dr. Sampath to deliver a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Manish. This is Dr. Sampath Kumar from Manipal University, Jaipur. I'm Director of School of Planning and Design. So small job, but difficult job too. So I first of all thank Srimati Mugdha Sinha, IAS Secretary to Government of Rajasthan in the area of DST for taking up this initiative to this level. Without her support, I think it is very difficult to host such a program. And also I thank our team at DST for organizing this sustainable dialogue with all this, with all the panelists. And now my next job is to thank the panelists, Professor Chetan Vaidya, Architect Ashok Lal, Professor Jahanara, Professor Vaibhavi, and Dr. Chika Jain for their expert comments on these things and their answering of all the questions that were asked and making this a grand success. And thank Architect Akshay Kaul for being the moderator for this, co-moderator for this program. And last, and I thank the team of MUJ, Professor Anuradha Chatterjee and Professor Madhura Yadav, who really worked day and night to collect all the people together, collect the subject, collect the topics, and make this a grand success. And Mr. Manish and his team of MUJ, that is Manipal University, Jaipur, for making the posters, for making all the possible contributions to make this sustainable dialogue a very grand success one. And last but not the least, the audience who have really logged in and are listening to this patience with patience. I also thank them and thank you one and all, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And a big thanks from me.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.